is just going to be an introduction on leather holster work or holster craft, whatever you want to call it, which is part of leather working. What we're going to do is today we're going to focus mainly on the basics, and I'm going to show you the different types of leathers that I use for making a holster. I will show you the types of leathers that you may not want to use. I'm going to give you a lesson on making a pattern for your holster, and we may start to work a little bit on the holster that I've already kind of pre-cut out, but it's just going to depend on time and how far I think we've covered the subjects for this introduction. But everybody has to start somewhere, and this is the place to start. So um, what we're going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and talk about this holster. This is one of my blaster holsters. This is my left leg holster, and I'm going to talk about the leather that I used to make this holster because I have some samples of that here next to me. But it didn't take very long to make. If I were to just focus solely on making a holster like this, and you have everything available, you're looking at I could probably make one in, I don't know, a day, maybe two. Um, the longest wait is on the wet forming, which you have to do to get it, to get the shape in the holster. But anyway, this holster is made out of the primary leather for this is a 7 to 8 ounce um, vegetable tanned leather, and then which would be this. This is veg tan leather. It's the kind of leather you really want to use for leather craft if you're going to be dyeing leather, if you're going to be tooling leather, which is putting the shapes in, like if you can see it. There we go. Tooling in the shapes and that kind of stuff. Um, so that would be the kind of leather that you would use for that. Here's another piece of that. This is what I used for the spacer, and I try to use a really thick leather for spacers. This is like a 13-ounce vegetable tan leather, which is basically just it's almost like a saddle skirting leather. It's like what they make saddles out of. It's super thick. It does not cut easily. In fact, it's pretty difficult to cut. I mean, we can test it with this X-Acto knife, and as you can see, it barely even cuts it. It's a very tough, it's a very strong leather because of its thickness, and that's why I like to use it as the spacer, which, let's see if I can hold this so the light will hit it just right. There we go. You'll see the spacer, which is right here. It's sort of that middle layer, and it runs the entire span and all the way down to the close at the bottom of the holster here. And then I also line my holsters, which is right here. And for that, normally I'll use pigskin, which is this. You can also use real thin suede. This is actually suede pigskin, but I use the suede end to glue in so it sticks real well. I glue that side in with contact cement, and then the outside part is the nice slick area, and that makes the draw a lot quicker. Slide the pistol in and out, and it keeps from wearing on the metal of the blaster. Or if you've got if you're using painted plastic or resin props, the smoother the surface, the less you're likely to wear off any paint or cause any surface issues. But this is like 1 ounce pigskin. It's super thin. You can also use it for gloves, but it is really thin. So it's like slightly thicker than, it's about as thick as if you put like 5 sheets of paper together. That's about as thick as it is. So it's super thick. And that's all the different types of leathers that go into this style holster. Now, you don't have to make such a complex holster for your first holster. You can, you don't have to use a spacer. You can just, fold the leather over and stitch together. It doesn't have to be as complex as this. This is actually the second holster I ever made. My first holster is my shoulder holster that I wear, what I like to call the Kildabi rig. It's kind of a Doc Holliday inspired holster. But this is the second holster I ever did, and I've still got to do one more for my right side. But yeah, so this is, and I might as well show you this before we continue. This is the same type of leather that we used in the pouch tutorial, which is a chrome tanned leather. Now, I wouldn't really suggest using chrome tan for holster unless you just, you really just want something to hold the gun. You don't really have any interest in making something as intricate as this. You just want to put together something quick. You can use chrome tan for that. Or even like a brain tanned hide, either way. But I tend to stay away from chrome tan leathers for holsters unless it's just something on the cheap. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how to do some patterning here. It's also not very difficult. I brought one of my blasters out so we can use that, and show you how this is done. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you can start on one side and flip the blaster and do it on that side. I say, why go to all that trouble? Why not just trace your blaster here on the outside, okay? Take the blaster out and then fold the paper in half. If you do that, then you've got your pattern at that point. So I'm going to show you that here real quick. And yes, I do keep my blaster always piece tied. It helps because this is an actual metal blaster, and people will get a little uptight sometimes, and I don't want anybody to get uptight. Alright, so we're going to move this more towards the center. Let me get some of this out of the way. There we go. And feel free to ask questions if anybody has any questions. It doesn't have to be, if you've got a big enough sheet of paper here, it doesn't have to be, perfectly centered on the paper or anything like that. The main goal is you want to make sure you've got enough paper to fold this in half, because you're going to be folding this side. Let's see, how are we going to do this? Yeah, because we're going to be folding it this way. I just want to make sure we're folding in the right direction here. Yep, I'm going to use my, this is another pattern. This is actually my leg holster pattern that I've made. There we go. Yep. So where we're going to trace is right here along the bottom part of the pistol, or the part where I should say the inside handle area and trigger guard. That's what we're going to trace, because that's the part that faces. I'm trying to figure out my wording here. That's the part that faces the the hand. This part here, yes, we will trace it, but the main part that we want to ensure is that we make a center line from this, which is the topmost portion of the gun, of the blaster. So, all right, so I'm going to just start here, and we're just going to do a quick trace. It doesn't have to be perfect, because all this is doing is giving us an outline. Now, the main thing we want to do, and I'm going to use this pattern here as the example to show you, and I'm going to take the blaster away because we've got it traced at this point. We don't really need it at the moment. All right, so we want to be able to create this outside area here, okay? Because the blaster is going to fit into the holster, just like that, and the handle is going to raise out slightly from the top. So what we've got to do is get this nice smooth curve along the back here, okay? So the way I do that is I just go from this part of the handle, this bottom tip, okay? And I like to make a little line there just to say, hey, this is the extreme bottom-most area. And then I know that I need to place a hole here so that my finger can go in and grip that area when I'm, as I'm drawing the blaster. So the next thing I do is I take my little ruler here and I measure out how far I want to, how far I need to go to make this blaster sit nice and snug in the holster without causing any like deformities of the holster and still be able to stitch it, okay? That seems to be the measurement of my original pattern there. But you can, one of the things that you can do in order to figure out this line is you can put, and I'll show you this here shortly. I don't want my hat getting in the way here of this. You can actually fold this over and get your measurements that way. All right, so there's that, and that should be perfect. Yep. All right, so what I'm going to do here is let me grab my ruler, and we're going to make a straight line down through there. If I can, there it is. There's my ruler. We're going to make a line down through there just to get our center line. Oop, sorry. All right, so there's our center line. If we base it on the topmost part of the blaster. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and start making my marks based on these lines. And you can just kind of hand draw this. It doesn't have to be perfect. What I like to do is draw these out based on the contour of the blaster. And I try to keep that same spacing all the way around as I do this pattern. Now you see we're not going to meet this line down here, and that's fine because we actually want to start to bring that in a bit. And you're going to say, well, this fits right up against it. Well, it does, because what's going to happen is once we place our spacer in here, it's going to give this area enough space for the barrel, or yeah, right here at the end of the barrel. It's going to fit down just like that. There will be a slight bit of space right here, but that's okay. It's not going to be enough to hurt anything. It won't hurt the way that your gun sits or any of that. And now up here we know that, like I said, we're going to have a finger hole for our blaster. Now you don't have to make it as, you don't have to, obviously you can keep all this sort of solid, but I like to have a sort of little finger area here. And we can go back and make that a little more straight. Just for the trigger. We bring it back up, end it in that same area. Let's use a ruler just to make sure we're nice and straight here. All right, now we've got our front. This is the front of our blaster, which will face to the outside of your thigh. Or I should say this faces away, and and what we'll do is we're going to flip it. We can flip it either way. We can flip it if we're trying to make a right holster. You would flip it onto the back and then turn the paper over. If you're making a left holster like this, am I right about that? Let's see. That one's going to be, yes, left, and then the other way would be right. So now up here at the top is where it gets a little complicated, okay? Because you've got to have enough to make a loop for your belt. So what I like to do here is I will take this area. Okay, well, we'll wait until we flip it. I'll show you how we do that. Let's flip it first. Okay, so we're going to make a, I don't know, I don't think it really matters. If you take this pattern and you flip it this way, oh, guess what? Look, you've got right. If you flip it this way, oh, look, you got left. So it doesn't really matter how we want to flip it. We just need to flip it. So I am actually going to flip it. Let's see. Let's cut it first, at least on this outside. Then we'll flip it. See if I can do this nice and easy without cutting all the way through. There we go. Alright, so I'll grab my scissors here. I've already got a little cut line made, so I know exactly where I need to cut. And we just go through here. Go ahead and get that out of the way. We're going to cut our bottom here. And we're going to cut that all the way to the fold line. And snip this a little bit here. And then since we've already got this part drawn out, let's go ahead and cut it out. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut this part right to the fold line. Alright, so now we've got our front, our holster front, or outside flap of the holster cut out. Now at this point, no matter what we do for the back, you'll be able to flip it and use it for a left or right legged holster. Okay? So what we're going to do at this point is let's go ahead and trace the area that we know is going to be absolute on the back half of the holster, which is going to be everything from here all the way to here is absolute. We already know that that has got to follow us to the back of the holster. So, all right, so right there we are with that. Now, we need to make something up here that will either attach to our belt or let us, either create a loop or a slot so that we can put a loop through it, something of that nature. So what I'm going to do at this point is we know it ends here. So I like to taper my holsters off, like you'll see here see this nice little taper. It goes up a bit, and then I have this taper, and it tapers pretty quickly, just like it does on this side as well. It tapers up fairly quickly. And I'll actually bring the actual holster down here and show you. So you've got this nice taper here and this taper back here. And that just keeps the holster from looking a lot bigger than it should. But we need to go up a little bit. Where's my small ruler? Here we go. So we go up a little bit, not much. And then we start to make our taper here. So I'm going to use the ruler on that as well. And it's not going to be a huge taper, just something that's maybe, I don't know, a couple inches or so. In fact, you can use your index finger, your trigger finger hole here as sort of your guide. So I'll make a little light mark here and say we'll taper it up to there. But what I'm going to do here is, instead of making it a straight shot, I'm going to curve it up, kind of a gentle curve, just like that. Gentle curves always look good on leather, and they work a lot better than sharp angles. All right, so we've got that. Now on this side, we need a slight taper in as well, and we can probably go with just a very, very slight taper. That also curls up. And that actually gives us just enough of a wide strap here at the top of our holster to where you can rivet it to a belt if you wanted to. You can rivet it to another piece of leather similar to like the DL44 type holster. Whatever you want to do there, you can do that with this piece up here. Now on mine, I actually made that piece go all the way up because I use a special type of I use a special piece that I built that this goes through on my girth belt that creates like a low slung, almost kind of like a tactical version of a Western blaster where it's nice and slung low. But you don't have to go that crazy with it. You can take and just rivet this to another piece of leather that's on a belt or whatever. You know, you can make this as long as you want to do whatever you want. So let's go ahead and finish cutting this out. We can move that out of the way. And make sure to really stay on those lines when you cut. All right. So there we have our blaster holster pattern. And as you can see, it's not, it didn't take that long to do. Now, we're going to put our blaster in here just for a moment, just to kind of get a feel of how this pattern is going to work. And you're going to say, oh my gosh, it doesn't fit in there. Oh, but the reality of it is, when you bring this together here, it actually fits perfectly. And you got plenty of room to stitch and everything. So it's actually, this part right here could actually be tapered down a bit more. And I do on my own pattern. You see how the bottom on this one's got a little bit of a taper down. We left this one straight, which is more similar to like a DL44 pattern. But you can taper it down a little bit more if you want to. But that ends up being perfect. So there is our blaster pattern, and that's our starter pattern. And from there, you can make a right-handed or a left-handed pattern. You can also use this pattern as the basis for any other kind of pattern you want to make. Let's see if I can reach in here and grab, like here is my shoulder blaster pattern. And you can see it's a very similar style pattern where I've got the finger loop in there. And then these are for the D-rings for the shoulder straps. So you can use this pattern, you know, your basic pattern that you made, to create a multitude of other patterns. You don't have to just make one and be done with it. Once you have your base here, you can kind of go several different directions if you want to.